wild tribes of the West were being inconsiderate. They refused to follow the buffalo into oblivion just to accommodate people who were only passing through. My father sent for me and said, "My son, never forget my dying words. This country holds your father's body. Never sell the bones of your father and your mother." But somebody had sold them, along with the land. It had taken 100 years of bribery and intimidation and dishonored treaties to legalize the trespass. No matter that the party of the first part could not read and often was not told what he had signed, or that the government sometimes decreed a man a chief so it would bind a whole tribe with his signature, or that no Indian could dispose of any land without the consent of all the two-leggeds and the four-leggeds and the ghosts and the gods to whom it rightfully belonged. But consent was no longer of interest to the party of the second part. I'm afraid that the agreements which we had made before did not make allowances for the rapid growth of the white race. You must submit to our forward progress and do the best you can. Said the party first part, "What treaty that the white man has made has he ever kept? Not one. Indian tribes are merely domestic dependents, not sovereign nations. A parent may abrogate an agreement with his own children when it is for their own good. Because your lies have squirmed across our land like snakes, it does not make it the snake's land. This country does not belong to the Indians, but to the Almighty, and all his children have an interest in it. So metes and bounds must be set. Metes and bounds were set, and in such a way that the Almighty's white children would have all the choice land, while a few scrub acres were reserved for his red children. General Sherman defined a reservation, a worthless parcel of ground set aside for Indians and completely surrounded by white thieves. But the Indian Bureau considered them way stations between two cultures, where in isolation, Indians could somehow learn to be white men. Here, warriors were coerced into doing squaw work. Their leaders were humiliated and replaced by hand-picked chiefs. They sickened between four walls. Forced to build houses, they erected teepees behind them in which to die. Unwilling to farm and unable to hunt, the Indians were fed government rations, doled out at starvation level to keep them docile. That is, what wasn't sold to enrich the agents of the Indian Bureau. Agency beef was issued on the hoof and killed by the Indians in pathetic imitation of the buffalo hunt. That is, if it didn't die first. Much of it was so diseased it couldn't be eaten. When the Indians complained, they were punished by rations so sickening that one sympathetic agent said, "The government had better issue arsenic and get the poisoning process finished with decent expedition." Then the government ordered the Sundance Lodge torn down and gradually outlawed all pagan ceremonies. For the first time since the Bill of Rights, free exercise of religion was being denied an entire people under penalty of federal law. The Black Hills. Here, the great mystery had strewn visions for the souls of Dakota warriors to prepare them for the beyond place. This was Holy Land, so sacred that a special treaty forbade the entry of white men for so long as the grass shall grow. Then, a scientific expedition invaded the hills with secret orders to discover gold, to deliberately set off such a stampede of miners that the treaty would be unenforceable. Overnight, the Indians' precious lodgepole timber was turned into charcoal for the gold smelters. They had called the hills their meat pack, but the two-leggeds drove away the game. Having profaned the sacred place, the whites offered to pay for it, at a discount, of course. Then they sent word to all the tribes. The government is determined that all tribal Americans shall be consolidated into two reserved areas. All who do not submit peacefully will be deemed to be hostile and will be hunted down and brought in by force. A new policy. All Indians of the plains are to be re-reservated. Regardless of tribal differences now, all are to be herded together into two big reservations. A sterile wasteland in Oklahoma and another in Dakota. There they would be domesticated, broken like broncos in a corral. The wild Indian was expected to purr. Instead, he started to growl. I do not want to settle down in the houses you would build for us. I love to roam over the wild prairie. There I am free and happy. When we sit down, we grow pale and die. Why do you ask us to leave the rivers and the sun and the wind and live in a house? I have only one heart. Although you say, go to another country, my heart is not that way. I am here, and here's where I am going to be. I will not part with my lands, and if you come again, I will say the same thing. I will not part with my land. My people have never drawn the first bow against the whites. The blue-dressed soldiers come from out of the night, and for campfires they light our lodges. Instead of hunting game, they kill my braves. They make sorrow come into our camps. They are asking for war. In the camp of the blue-dressed soldiers, they were expecting war, but not asking for it. This truant chasing is at best an inglorious business, without any compensating advantage. But there would be advantage for one man, George Custer. Under a portrait of his favorite person, and also under a cloud and facing a board of inquiry for insubordination, Custer had just heard from Eastern politicians that a flashy victory in the field would not only restore his faded Civil War glory, it would guarantee him the Democratic nomination for the presidency of the United States. One man at least was anxious to hear the bugle call, boots and saddles. The call came, and with it, orders to round up some runaway Sioux under Sitting Bull. Refusing to be reservated, they had defiantly gone off buffalo hunting. June 1876, the 7th United States Cavalry slow-trotted off to search for some half-naked savages, who had also been described as the finest light cavalry in the world. They arrived about here, deep in Montana Territory, when Custer's scouts reported a large Indian encampment down there in the Greasy Grass River. To engage them here would have been a violation of orders. Instead, he was to report back to his superiors, who would dispatch a larger force to bring in the fugitives. But this would mean sharing the glory, and that was no way to get to be grandfather in Washington. Besides, Custer was afraid his troops had been discovered, and the Indians might escape. Anyway, a hunting camp never held more than a handful of warriors. So Custer decided to attack. He divided his command, and he sent 136 men under Majorino along the other bank of the river to hit the camp from the left. Then, Custer took 5 companies, 225 men along this side of the river, meaning to cross it and simultaneously attack the other end of the camp. It was a simple pincer's movement, tactically sound, except for one thing. Between the pincer's jaws were not the few hundred Indians he supposed, but closer to 10,000. The last seen of Custer, he was riding along these bluffs, looking for a way to the White House by crossing the Greasy Grass, or, as it was marked on his map, the Little Bighorn. The only eyewitness account of what happened after that is contained in the drawings and actual words of the only qualified reporters, the survivors. Everything happened fast. There was hardly time to paint our faces and canoes. The Wasatch soldiers charged the upper end of our camp, where the Hunkpapa lodges were, and we were ready for them. Our men were calling to each other, "Brave up, brothers. It is a good day to die." The white man soldiers were surprised that we fought back so hard. They got off their horses and hid in the woods to shoot. Then they did a foolish thing. They were either drunk or crazy, but they ran out of the woods and into the river to get to the other side. We killed many in the water, but most of them got up on a hill, where we kept shooting at them to let them run out of bullets and water. We had seen the other soldiers riding downstream before the fighting started. Maybe they thought to catch us running away. We left a few boys and warriors to keep the first soldiers on the hill. Then we all went to surprise the men who wanted to surprise us. We knew the other soldiers would try to cross the river at the best fording place. So we got there first and crossed the river before they did. Brave up, brothers. The earth is all that lasts. When the soldiers got off their horses to shoot, the men who hold the horses could not hold them, and they ran all over. We got many horses that day, and the bullets that were in the bundles tied to the horses. The shooting was close together, like the tearing of a blanket. We had warriors as plenty as leaves on trees, and we got behind the white soldiers and all around them. They broke up into little groups, which made them easy to kill, like cutting off buffalo from the herd. Many white soldiers fought bravely, and our people did not go near them, but hid to shoot at them from far away. Some of the Wasatchew went crazy and ran around in circles or shot their guns in the air. Finally, there were only a few left. They went up a hill a little way and stopped there, forever. The fight was over quick. It took no longer than the sun takes to travel between two lodge poles. When the fighting was over, the women came and cut up the soldier dead, so that none of them could return from the beyond place and fight again. Our blood was hot, and we wanted to rub out the other soldiers on the other hill. But our chief said, "They are trying to live. Let them go. We have killed enough. Let the others live." It was over. We took our lodges and our women and children and went into the mountains. Then they said, we washed off our paint in the river and put the war back in the bag. But we knew it would not stay there. We would not have peace. And they were right. They hadn't sought this battle. And all that the victory brought them was 12 years of a war they could not win. On this field, the blue-dressed soldiers marked where each of their dead had fallen. But without meaning to be, these were monuments to something else, too. They indicate the high water mark of a culture, a way of life. And they are the last milestones on the last journey of the people who were here first. The trail is still there, the Indians say, but it's like the road of the dead, where all the footprints point the same way. And alongside it are strewn the discarded dreams of warriors and young men who had asked the everywhere spirit to let a good thing happen. And the trail is littered too with the worn-out visions of the old ones, full of winters, who turned wearily off toward the camp in the stars, into the land of many lodges. They say the trail is still there, dimly traced across the whole of the Great Plains by the poles of many pony drags. And moccasin prints branch off into draws and coulees, where children have strayed to stalk the butterfly and chase the kit fox, and search for the fallen feather of a hawk. It is marked too, they say, where the grass is slashed by the unshod hooves of the buffalo ponies, and by the war ponies, with their painted flanks, and the plumes of eagles woven in their manes.